So hello, I'm Kate Henderson, seed saver and gardener for the Heirloom Seed Sanctuary. The Heirloom Seed Sanctuary is a ministry of the Sisters of Providence of St. Vincent de Paul, and it is sanctuary for a collection of locally adapted seeds brought here in the late 90s by local organic farmers Carol and Robert Moak. The seed collection includes vegetable, flower, and herb varieties that they grew for their market garden: onions, cucumbers, tomatoes, lettuce, beets, and carrots, spinach, peas, beans, and almost any other commonly available variety. The Heirloom Seed Sanctuary defines the word heirloom as to mean a variety that either has been or is worthy of being passed down through generations. So just as furniture and other items are lovingly made to this day for the purpose of being passed down in families, heirloom varieties are always open-pollinated, which means, according to the About a Family Initiative on Canadian Seed Security, open-pollinated, or OP, OPs produce seed that closely resemble the parent. OP varieties are a result of combining parents that are genetically similar. If you plant an OP, save seed, and grow that seed the next season, the plants will look like the ones you grew last year. So one of my seed-saving teachers has been John Navazio, organic plant breeder and author of the book Organic Seed Grower. He begins his book by explaining the significance of seed saving. Seed is the vital link to our agricultural past. All of the changes that have occurred in the domestication of our crops are a reflection of the ingenuity and perseverance of our agricultural ancestors. This is even more wondrous when we realize that all of the plants we rely on for our very existence are derived from wild plants that were not usually succulent. In fact, they were often bitter or sour, far beyond what our modern palates would tolerate. The modern crops that grace our tables daily are all derived from a much larger number of plants that were found to be edible and were used extensively by our hunter-gatherer forebears. While natural selection had already shaped these wild plants, the selection pressure of the people who first grew them under cultivation further changed them to better suit their needs. These webinars are for beginner seed savers, those who are just starting to develop their relationship with a particular favorite vegetable, flower, and herb plant variety. Seed saving can be complicated, but for some plants it is quite simple, so we will focus here on those simpler types so that you can experience success and lay a foundation on which to build your seed saving practice. I believe that we are all born seed savers, since in essence seed saving is just sorting desirable plants from undesirable plants, good tasting fruits from bad tasting fruits, whole healthy seeds from less desirable seeds, etc. So just watch a child with a box of Smarties candy and you'll see how we do this naturally. In live workshops, I do this exercise with adults and the same pattern arises. Do you see the chipped, damaged blue Smartie there? That one got popped into a mouth right away. It was no good for saving. So we want you to help develop this precious relationship of midwife to your plants. And to this end, this series will come full circle with one episode per month, from starting with stored seed all the way around to sorting your harvested seed. These webinars are based on a workshop series that was hosted originally by Carol and Robert Moak until 2008, and then by myself. That's Robert Moak on the left-hand side of your screen, with two of the Sisters of Providence of St. Vincent de Paul tasting Robert's delicious tomatoes. It is a series of 9 workshops, each of which is timed according to what a seed saver in Kingston, Ontario, Canada can expect to be doing in their seed garden. They therefore occur once monthly throughout the growing season, and we recommend you view them in that order and at the appropriate time of year. But they will be recorded so that they can be reviewed again when they're not live. So these are not gardening workshops. Gardening is involved, of course, but there are many great gardening resources out there. So we will leave you to find those while we focus on seed saving. I myself was a professional gardener for many years before I thought to save seeds of my own, but now I find it a very enriching, meaningful activity, and I hope to facilitate that same reverence in you. plant varieties that for thousands of years have been cultivated by human beings are themselves living beings in direct reciprocal relationships with humans, providing us with nourishment and beauty, while we provide them with a safe nursery for their seeds and a healthy growing situation for them as plants. This comes to the heart of the kindness of the mystery of creation. So to paraphrase Father Thomas Berry, the universe is a communion of subjects, not a collection of objects. I wish you awe and wonder on this journey to saving your own seeds. So that's our general intro. Now for this particular workshop, this webinar will be mainly focused on planning, with a bit of planting that will bleed into the next month's topic. So at this time of year, it's a little bit early to plant most things, but there is some preparation for planting that you can do now. So we'll get you starting to think about that. Here we will introduce you to planning and planting for seed saving. And we'll do that by talking about what is a seed is, planning for pollination, botanical names and taxonomy, choosing seed to begin with, and preparing to plant. So what is a seed? A seed is the result of fertilization for plants. It's a baby plant or a plant embryo. Seeds are just one way a plant reproduces. So what does a seed consist? This can get complicated, but the basics that we need to know are three parts: the embryo, the endosperm, and the seed coat. So these three intact make a viable seed. Why do we need to know this? Because something that looks like a seed, but that is missing one of these, will not germinate and will not grow our food. So the embryo is the baby plant, a genetic coding for certain characteristics that came from both parents, like human babies. As in humans, it takes a male gamete, in this case sperm carried by pollen, and a female gamete, also called egg or an ovule. In other words, the egg has to be fertilized in order to form an embryo. Many plants can reproduce in more than one way, through cuttings or by root division, etc. But most of our vegetables that we commonly eat reproduce by sexual reproduction, forming seeds. The endosperm is a very important energy source for the embryo, so that's the second part. And it typically fills out the seed coat and makes it look plump as opposed to withered. An embryo with a good energy source, provided by the mother plant, will be able to stay dormant in storage until we are ready to plant it again. The seed coat, which is the last part there, protects the embryo from water, bacteria, and fungus and so forth. And so it really must be intact in order for the seed to survive. And usually we can see this with the naked eye. Why should we care about this? We may start to risk this becoming the same old biology lesson you may have had in school. So why is this important for all of us, not just biologists? It's because we eat. Seeds of Diversity says it very well. Throughout the world, people rely on cultivated plants for their food. Even food that comes from animals, meat, milk, and eggs, depends on cultivated plants for the animals to eat. So food that does not come from the sea surely relies on seeds. Vegetables grow from seeds, livestock animals eat seeds and plants, and grains, of course, are seeds. So whosoever controls seeds controls our food. Can any of us go without eating? Then whosoever controls seed controls us. John Navazio points out, early in the 21st century, we are at a juncture in the history of agriculture where the people of all agricultural societies have a choice as to which of these paradigms they are going to follow. The seed is a reflection of the farming system as it is grown, cultivated, selected, and fully incorporated into that system. Are the crop varieties and the crop genetic resources of our ancestors going to keep adapting to fit the needs of organic agriculture at the hands and through the innovation of farmers and regional seed companies that have a relationship with farmers? Or will we allow the power to go to a corporate elite that shape our agricultural future based on shareholder profits? The road ahead for agriculture will be determined in large part by those who shape and ultimately control the seed. The Sisters of Providence have listed 11 reasons to save seed, including variety, connection with the earth and mystery of creation, culture, taste, and economics. Saved and traded seeds are free. So we heard a bit about pollination and that male pollen has to reach the female ovule. So we know how this works in humans. There has to be a male and a female, but plants have been on this planet a lot longer than us, and they have evolved a few different ways of fertilizing an egg to form an embryo. We have included a definition sheet as a link for you to fill out. So let's take a moment to open it, because getting some terms right will definitely help us on our way to saving the seeds that will feed us. And so see if this works for you. You should be able to type right into that sheet if you can reach the link, and you can let us know how that goes. Maybe at this time also you'd like to take a moment to remember what constitutes an open pollinated or OP variety, because that's on there too. So a plant that self-pollinates, a self-pollinator or selfer. Also known as an inbreeder, by the way. This is a plant that has both male and female parts and that can accept that pollen to fertilize its own ovule. So this is a life-size model, or an extra large model, I guess, an interactive model of a self-pollinating flower that we've made, and the kids get quite a kick out of that. So it has both male and female parts and can accept that pollen to fertilize its own ovules. A plant that cross-pollinates, also known as an outbreeder or a crosser, is a plant that may or may not have both male and female parts on one plant, but that cannot accept its own pollen in fertilizing the ovule. And here again are our model male and female flowers for the kids. So some plants that cross-pollinate are like us in that there are female plants and male plants that make up the population. But in many common types of plant have both on each plant. So the amazing diversity of methods of reproduction and seed formation will cause genuine wonder to develop in your heart. So I recommend doing more reading on this. We will delve into it more deeply later in the season when we have real flowers to look at, because flowers form seeds. And I will include resources at the end of this presentation for you to look up as well. But for now, we will just say that beginner seed savers should start with growing self-pollinators, because there's less chance of pollen from a different variety fertilizing the ovule of the variety you want to save. Among the cross-pollinators, accidental pregnancies or crosses can easily occur if you do not plan your garden very carefully. So even self-pollinators require some garden planning techniques that you may not have considered, which is what we will cover today. So by the way, the terms self or inbreeder and cross or outbreeder are actually on a continuum. So the slide that you're looking at right now is a great shows that very well, except that corn should be on the far outbreeder side. You can see from this graphic that there are lots of our common plants somewhere along the continuum. So this also affects planning your garden because, and here's my little garden plan, because if it also has an impact on the number of the population size, the number of plants you need to grow. So as you can see, we'll go back to our slide. So the peas, lettuce, tomato, you can probably save fairly good seed from even just 5 plants. Although more is always better, but that's acceptable because they do not really suffer from inbreeding depression. whereas the larger populations, the outcrossers, do tend to suffer from inbreeding depression if you don't grow the larger populations. So farmers can easily manage these population sizes, the larger population sizes of the outbreeders, but they're more difficult for a home gardener to manage. So peas are used as an example of self-pollinator because each flower has both male and female parts, which are self-fertile, and those flowers stay tightly closed, actually, until 24 hours after fertilization. So these beautiful flowers here stay closed, actually. However, as you can imagine, a determined bee could still break into one. They're still flowers. They're not safe. So could still break into more than one flower and would thereby likely cross-pollinate those flowers, rare though this may be. So, and we just have to work with that. We can take certain steps to keep our heirlooms true to type, similar to their parents, but we must acknowledge with Dr. Vandana Shiva, you cannot control diversity, you can only co-evolve and co-create with it. So, something to think about. In terms of, we'll move a little bit into plant taxonomy or botanical names. This is one tool you should learn to use in planning your seed garden. Botanical names were developed to help us know who is able to reproduce with whom. So common names do not help with this, although they do give us clues about characteristics sometimes. So what is an example? The common garden beans that we grow, also called green beans or snap beans, they all have the same botanical name pretty much. It's Phaseolus vulgaris. And even though we may know them by the terms I just mentioned, we may also know them by particular variety names like tender green or Kentucky wonder. Phaseolus is the name for the genus and is capitalized when you write it. Vulgaris is the name for the species, and it is usually at the species level that reproduction happens. Wait, what's this? Some people goofing around in the garden. How about that? So, back to the beans. Tender green and Kentucky wonder are the same species and technically could therefore cross. They will not likely cross with your scarlet runner beans, however, because scarlet runner are Phaseolus coccineus. Same genus, different species. Once you do get into cross-pollinating species, you will have to be more careful because, for instance, acorn squash is the same genus and species as all zucchini, as are small sugar, sugar pie pumpkin. And they would love to cross-pollinate if they are not kept very separate and or hand-pollinated. The photo you're looking at now is a crop that was supposed to be a small sugar pie pumpkin. And even though there is no zucchini in the Heirloom Seed Sanctuary collection, some pollen must have arrived from somebody's garden nearby because one year we had a lot of very zucchini-like plants in our small sugar pie pumpkin patch. So we had to remove them as soon as possible and start doing some hand pollinating. And that seems to have worked. We seem to have gotten the small sugar pie pumpkin back. But this is one thing that can happen if you don't know who's growing what near you and what their botanical name is. So all seed-saving resources, all the books and such that we get, are divided up into families because of their similarities for reproduction. So this is another reason to know your botanical names. To look up your Kentucky wonder beans and your scarlet runners and even your peas, you will have to go to the section in the resource on Fabaceae, which is the family name of all the leguminous crops in your garden. Another reason to look up botanical names is to know what weeds are sexually compatible with your crops. So lettuce is normally a self-pollinating crop for us here in Ontario, but there is a wild lettuce not too far away that is the same genus and species as our domestic lettuce, Lactuca sativa, which can play havoc with the lettuce seed crop from what I hear. Certainly, we have trouble with carrot seed in our region because of this beautiful flower you see on your screen. This is Queen Anne's lace, which is Daucus carota, and it's the same genus and species, fully sexually compatible with our domestic carrot. And like the zucchini, tends to be quite aggressive genetically. So to plan your garden, your seed garden, you will have to start with what? Seeds. And how will you know the botanical name of what you wish to grow? So here's the list of the common self-pollinating crops with which I recommend you start your seed-saving career. So lettuce, Lactuca sativa in the family Asteraceae. Pea, Pisum sativum in the family Fabaceae. Bean, Phaseolus vulgaris, also family Fabaceae. And tomato, Solanum lycopersicum in the family Solanaceae. Start with just one of each, only if you have a variety you already know you love. If you don't like eating beans, then don't grow a bean. Again, I must emphasize, saving seeds means developing a relationship with the plants, one of mutual benefit. They benefit you with some food you love to eat, and you benefit them by keeping their babies alive and planting them to grow again. Plan to acquire seeds for the varieties you love from a reliable source. If the Heirloom Seed Sanctuary collection has a variety you love, we can likely share some seeds with you to get you started. But if you don't live near Kingston, or if you need another variety, then you will have to find a reliable source. So let's assume that you have to purchase some seeds to start with. Seeds of Diversity is a great place to start. Their website lists all the Seedy Saturdays and Seedy Sundays happening around the country, so you can find one close to you and plan to attend. The benefits of buying seeds at Seedy Saturday is that you can usually speak directly to smaller local grower vendors who will be able to help you find exactly the type of vegetable seed you seek. And they can probably give you tips as to how best to grow it for seed. Most local growers are either organic or ecological, so you can be sure they are not selling you any seed that is genetically modified, for instance. You may also find the variety you seek on the seed swap table for free. Perhaps one of your community members is already growing that one for seed, and they'd love to tell you all about it. If you can't make it to a seedy event, do visit the Seeds of Diversity website to get a listing of all the seed companies in Canada who sell heirloom open-pollinated seeds. Many of them have websites of their own and can send you seeds in the mail. However you find your seeds, be sure that they are not labeled F1. F1 means hybrid, and hybrid seeds will likely not grow true to type because they have different parents. If you save seeds from a hybrid, you will not likely be able to predict what those seeds will grow into, or even whether the seeds will be viable and grow. And here's a hint, this one's on your definition sheet as well. If you have been given older seed and you're not sure if it will germinate, but you really want to try it, this is a great time of year to test its health by planting, say 10 seeds, to see how many of them germinate. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get into the planting side of things. But sometimes we are fortunate enough to inherit some seeds. So now that you have some theory in place to know why you would plan your garden in a certain way for saving seeds, let's look at some actual planning strategies and how they will work in your garden. Seeds of Diversity points out two main differences in planning the seed garden. One, plants grown for seed often need to grow for a longer time than if they are grown for some other edible part. This might change the way you would normally rotate or replant. And two, varieties of the same species have to be isolated from each other, usually by a certain distance. I would add to that, I also plan to label the varieties for seed saving in the field. So you can see the photo here that I have planted 2 rows of one variety of tomato, in this case Livingston Stone. And this is a large enough population for a home garden seed saver, and you can see that this is the only tomato variety in the screen. There's a crop of peppers to the left and some mixed mulched lettuce to the right. These lettuces are heading up nicely, and they have already been thinned out, so you can plant thicker than this and still thin them out for eating so that you only leave the nicest ones true to type with this kind of spacing. And they're spaced this way so that they will have lots of room to become even bigger plants when they bloom and go to seed, but they're close enough so that when they are that size, they will be physically touching. So that way, if there is any cross-pollination that occurs, it's sure to be with their own kind. Lettuces are one crop that you may want to start indoors for a seed crop. That way you can plant out only the best plants, and you will certainly have a long enough season for them to comfortably go to seed before the first frost. Here we have Royal Burgundy bush beans planted directly from seed in the ground in 3 rows. And we will be able to harvest some beans to eat from these plants, but we will also be sure to leave some pods to dry down on the plants to ensure our bean seed crop. Again, you can see that this bean is isolated from other beans of the Phaseolus vulgaris type. To the left we have some flowers, and to the right we have a lettuce crop. So those are some things to consider when you're actually drawing out your garden. So, getting ready to plant. So once again, these are not gardening workshops. There are many useful books and resources to help you plant your seeds indoors. The important thing for seed saving from your the important thing for saving seed from your plants is to put a little extra thought and care into the decisions you make on their behalf, because you are developing a relationship with your plants that will last the entire life of the plant and may even last for your entire life as well. So do plan time to be comfortable, relatively undistracted, and peaceful as you plant your seeds. Of the self-pollinators we recommend you start with, only lettuce and tomato need to be started ahead of the season indoors. And we recommend you try one of each to begin for maximum success. So it won't take you very long to start these ones indoors. So cherish this brief moment of bonding time with your seeds. So again, if you have had the honor of receiving heirloom seeds and you're not sure of their viability, do plant some of those seeds indoors at this time to check if they germinate. And those that do germinate can hopefully be potted up and planted outside later. And we'll have more of that in the next workshop on transplanting. So you want to think ahead about some of the materials you'll be using for your planting, though. Whatever method you decide to use. For instance, you will definitely need water, and you will probably want to start watering with rainwater as soon as that becomes available. But here in Kingston at this time, our rain barrels are upside down under snow, so rainwater is best, but do allow it to warm to room temperature so as not to shock your little babies. And it's a good idea to let your water sit out anyway for a little bit, because at this time of the year, we in Kingston are having to use city water, which does have some chlorine in it. So if you let that sit out, the chlorine will evaporate off, and you'll have a little bit cleaner water for your seeds. And as we note here, if your water comes from a well, that's great. But again, maybe let it sit for a couple of hours to get it to room temperature, so as not to shock the seeds. Think outside the box. So most seeds, as we know, are planted in plastic pots. Cell packs and plug trays and all those things, they tend to be made with plastic. We at the Heirloom Seed Sanctuary still choose the peat pots because they're reusable for a couple of years and then they compost. So we don't really know what happens to that plastic as it degrades, but we do know that it happens. We can see them degrading, and often plastic pots end up in the garbage because they're not recyclable anymore. And but what we don't know is how that affects our baby plants. So here at the Seed Sanctuary, we tend to recommend the peat pots for now. And definitely you'll want to label your plants, your heirloom varieties, so do try to find some popsicle sticks. They're available at most craft stores. And again, they're great because they just compost when they're done, so no waste. So be sure to label, to write on your popsicle stick with a permanent marker at least the crop name. We also like to note the date the seeds were planted so that we can see the germination rates. And sometimes we plant the number of seeds, or we write the number of seeds that were planted on that date, and we'll write that on the popsicle stick. So they're great things to use. This is a great time of year to draw your garden out on paper, and be sure to write the actual names of the varieties, like be really specific. The ones you're growing for seed should get written on in their designated spot in the plan. So for a little review of the materials you'll need, please do note what seeds require in order to germinate. So soil, water, warmth, and sometimes light. And the reason you need to remember this is that later on in the series, we'll be, again, coming back to this full circle. So we'll be covering how to remove these particular conditions so that the seeds don't germinate, so that they stay dormant in storage happily. So this is just something to flag for, you'll come back to it later on. So growing medium, water, seeds, pots, flats, containers, some light, labels to help you remember your variety names, and a permanent marker to write those labels. And this is me in the greenhouse following my own directions, writing the labels on a popsicle stick and putting them in with the flats. So I promised a list of my favorite resources that I go to for answers to my questions, because after many years of seed saving, I still have lots of questions. And here is our resource list. And I'd like to thank you very much for joining us for this, our very first in our series on saving seeds, the very first webinar. And I hope you can join us for the April webinar on planting seeds to save seeds, moving towards transplanting. Again, what we're actually doing in the Heirloom Seed Sanctuary Gardens at that time. It will, the live workshops still continue at this point, but this webinar is being recorded because they won't always carry on. So we're very happy to have this opportunity. And so thank you to yourselves and to the Bauta Family Initiative for Canadian Seed Security for offering this platform, and to the Sisters of Providence of St. Vincent de Paul.